So thank you everybody for being here today for this very special call. And the very first thing we want to say is that there is translation. So we're delighted to have our Arabic-speaking community here today. I think we have friends from Turkey, from Syria, maybe from Morocco and other places around the world. So please know that there is translation for you. And thank you so much, Bara, for providing us with that translation. And also we have translation to Ukraine, because in the Pocket Project, we work with a beautiful Ukrainian community, and we thought that today's call is of so much importance to you as well. With that, I would just like to do a short introduction into the call. This is a call that has really come out of the friendship that the Pocket Project and also I personally have had the joy of developing with Rola Hallam and her work in Syria and far beyond. And together we decided that we wanted to bring this event not only to commemorate the anniversary of the terrible earthquake that hit Syria and Turkey a year ago, but also in commemorating this, to bring our thoughts and our love to all those of us who are working on the front lines somewhere in the world and are struggling with how to stay energized, how to be in our power, how to give, how to serve, and at the same time, how to look after ourselves in that process. So self-care and trauma on the front lines is the title of our call today. And we're starting with a masterclass by Rola Hallam on preventing and overcoming burnout. And we would then like to transition into a second part of the call where we will open the space to sharings from this community, from you all, about your experiences on the front lines. And we will use global social witnessing to address that and to provide a deep listening space for each other. So we're very excited. In the first around 90 minutes, Rola Hallam will share from her experience as a Syrian medical doctor, experiencing the war in Syria, supporting, doing everything to help her people, and touching on burnout in the process, and then entering a journey of recovery, and also bringing all the learnings from that process to all the other people that she is now teaching, inspiring, working with. Yeah, and Rola Hallam is an award-winning doctor, trauma-informed life coach, speaker, social entrepreneur, humanitarian. She has been honored with several awards, is the first Syrian TED Fellow, and founder of Can Do, a humanitarian organization supporting frontline health and aid workers to save children's lives in their war-devastated communities. Rola has helped to build 7 hospitals in Syria, including the first ever crowd-funded hospital. And our latest TEDx talk, From Clever to Wise, How Healing Our Traumas Heals the World, shares what Rola's mission is about. I realize that I didn't say who I am, so my name is Kosha Joubert. I have the deep honor and joy of currently leading the Pocket Project which is growing pockets of healing for pockets of trauma around the world. And you will hear more from me later. And with that, I would love to hand over to you, Rola, and just thank you from my heart for, I know from previous experiences, bringing your authenticity, your beauty, your depth, and sharing it so generously with us tonight so we can all learn from and with you. Thank you for being here. Over to you.
Thank you for having me, Kosha. It's such an honor and a privilege. Thank you. Nice to meet everybody. I've been watching the chat as different places from around the world pop up. Keep telling us where you are coming from. I would love to hear where everyone is from. And I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen with you now. So just give me a second while I activate that, and maybe someone can give me a thumbs up when you can see my screen. Is that all good? Oh, I've just realized I didn't share with the sound. So just give me one more minute to share again, because we will need to at some point share some sound. So hello, salam, and welcome to everybody. I'm so grateful that you have all come here. And you know, I think that this is such a beautiful testament to one of my most recent lessons, if I'm very honest, which is that it is so important for us to heal in community, together, as a collective, to hear each other, to see each other, to witness each other. So the fact that I'm standing here before you and that we're all gathered here, all 154 of us, I think is a really beautiful testament to the field of energy, the field of healing energy that we can co-create together. And I very much see you all as co-creators here. Now, just quickly about how this collaboration came up. So as Kosha said, this event was really inspired by the anniversary of the devastating earthquake that hit Syria and Turkey almost exactly a year ago, killing over 50,000 people across Turkey and Syria. And being of Syrian origin, and I was sort of just coming out of the thickness of my burnout and what I was calling my valley of darkness, and seeing the scenes that were coming out of my country and out of Turkey, you know, I wanted to do what I had always done, which was book a flight, go over there, roll up my sleeves and do anything that I could, basically, be it in a hospital or, you know, lifting up the rubble. And thankfully, because of all the healing work that I had done, instead of booking a flight, I sat on my prayer mat, I prayed, I meditated, and I was inspired and guided to instead continue the work that I had already started, which was all about supporting frontline health workers, emergency responders, humanitarians with trauma recovery. And the specific guidance I was given was to contact 10 global experts on trauma and get their insights and to share their expertise with my affected community, but really to share it with all frontline and emergency responders. And one of those dear experts that responded to my call and to my SOS was Thomas Joubert. And that was how I came to meet Kosha and the Pocket Project. And so I'm just so delighted and thrilled and hardly surprised by the beautiful ripple effect that happens when, from an inspired idea, when something is done with that beautiful intention, and may it be healing to all of us here. So Kosha's already said that this event is going to be in two halves, and I'm going to be starting by talking and sharing my experience from burnout and trauma before we go on to the global social witness call afterwards. But before we continue, I would love to invite all of us to a minute's silence, and that is to really commemorate all our friends and colleagues that we have lost or that have been injured in the line of duty in any of the disasters and catastrophes and that our world is experiencing, whether natural or man-made, and to just honor their dedication, to honor their sacrifice. And so hopefully you can join me in a 1 minute of silent prayer for them. Thank you. Thank you all. Now, as Kosha said, my bio will tell you that I'm a medical doctor, that after becoming a specialist in anesthesia and intensive care when my home country of Syria was plummeted into a war on civilians that we all know about, that is now in its 13th year. I started to do humanitarian work, and so I would do medical missions between England, where I was living, and Syria, and helped to build 7 hospitals, including the first ever crowdfunded hospital where thousands of us from around the world came together to build Hope Hospital for children in northern Syria. I was honored by being invited on several global stages, from TED to TEDx, meeting various heads of stage and sharing the stage with various incredible grassroots activists, and being honored with several awards. But what my bio doesn't tell you was that there was never a moment when I wasn't on one of those stages heartbroken. And it won't tell you the huge emotional, mental, and physical toll that that took on me. And so 10 years into the revolution, 10 years into the work, 10 years into my humanitarian work, my wheels fell off. I remember the day when I was giving yet another BBC interview about yet another school bombing. And I just had this out-of-body experience. And suddenly I was seeing myself being interviewed and just thinking, like, what the hell? Like, how am I still talking about children being bombed? How am I still talking about hospitals being bombed, about my doctor colleagues being killed? And it's been 10 years. And honestly, from that point on, I descended into what I call my valley of darkness. And I felt so lost, so broken, so confused, so trapped. And by the grace of God, I emerged from that after going on a profound healing journey, when I realized that I finally had to feel in order to heal. And coming out of that journey, I found this beautiful line from the Sufi mystic and poet Rumi. And he said, "Yesterday I was clever, so I tried to change the world. Today I am wise, so I'm changing myself." And that for me so beautifully encapsulated one of my most profound teachings from this whole episode. You know, I was so busy being a savior and being out there in the world, trying to change it, and was doing very little of the work within myself, whether that is focusing on my own healing or my growth or my evolution. And so now the work that I've been doing on myself, but the work that I'm inviting you all here to do, all of you change makers, all of you for working on social justice from around the world, is to become wiser. is to do the work that you need to change yourself so that we can be embodying of the change that we deserve and we want to see in the world. Now, my talk is not an academic talk. In fact, it's a very deeply personal talk. And I do that on purpose because I really don't feel like I'm standing here as an expert trying to teach you. I am no longer a savior that's trying to fix. Yes, I have some knowledge and some wisdom and some tools that I'm hoping to impart and I'm hoping to share. But what I'm really wanting to do is share my personal journey for 3 reasons. First of all, I believe that we need to break the taboo of speaking about burnout and trauma, especially in the medical world, in the humanitarian world, in the spheres where we are seen as the heroes, where we are seen as the caregivers, where we are the ones who are expected to go out day in and day out and relentlessly give. And yet we don't do the self-care that we need. And so I don't believe that we are short on data or evidence or information. But what I do feel we are short of is leadership that really embraces the power of vulnerability and is able to stand in its power and say, yes, I burnt out. And yes, I was deeply traumatized. And still be able to share that from a place of power. The second reason I'm sharing with you a personal journey is because I want to invite you on your own personal journey. And so you are the expert on you. And so with everything that I'm going to be saying today, I'm going to stop and pause and give time for reflection because I want you to really see how is what I'm saying applicable to you. See what comes up for you as you hear me speak. And I invite you to allow what comes up, whatever powerful emotion, whatever it is that comes up for you, and just hold it without judgment, to just be a compassionate presence with it. And of course, we will go on later on for our global social witness call. And so if anything does come up and you feel like sharing with us, we will be honored to hold a space for you. And finally, the reason I'm sharing it is because I believe my greatest message of hope is sharing in my healing journey. And I really feel so blessed and graced that I was able to go from the deepest darkness of that dark night of the soul that I was in to now being able to continue in my divine destiny. And I'm now accompanying others during their dark night of the soul. And so I hope that healing journey will inspire you to either commence yours or to continue on yours. Now, what I want to start with is a practice called calm space. I believe that you will enable and catalyze your healing so many more folds, and you will also strengthen your resilience so many more folds when you develop your ability to sense and hold your emotions in a safe space. And so this practice is all about welcoming all feelings. It's about working to create an internal area of safety, a calm space within, because it is in that calm space that we create within us that we can each reach and find new possibilities, new ways of being, new ways of doing. Now, many of us here are used to being a compassionate presence for others, but struggle terribly with being a compassionate presence for ourselves. And that's what the calm space practice is an invitation for, to be a calm presence, compassionate presence for yourself so that you can really hear and accept yourself. And so I'm going to start with this practice. And I'm just going to say that this really is a practice. And everything I'm going to share with you today is a practice. And by that, I mean, it is not an intellectual and an intellectual knowing. It's about you having an experience of it. And therefore, consistently practicing something is how you're going to find any of the benefit of it. I intensively did 6 months of daily nervous system regulation work before I was able to come out of my survival state that I was stuck in. And so if now during the practice, you're not able to connect with that calm space, that's okay. We welcome that. And if pain comes up as you're trying to connect with your calm space, we also welcome that. And if you feel flat and blunt and not feeling of anything, we will also welcome that. Calm space is really about you creating that space within you in order to allow your emotions to be. And I know that certainly it happened for me, and I know it's the case with many of my clients, and so therefore I'll guess it, the case with many of you here, that we are often afraid to express our emotions, afraid to start crying in case we don't stop, afraid to grieve in case it just threatens to overflow and overwhelm us. And I'm here to share with you that actually you can cultivate space so that that does not happen. Just like if I was to pour this much water into a tiny glass, it will overflow and I'll get very wet. If I'm putting the same amount of water into a much bigger glass, it will just be held there. And it's the same thing with our emotions. And so if it feels comfortable for you, I want you to gently close your eyes. And if that doesn't feel safe, then to just soften your gaze and just gently find your breath. No need to alter it, no need to change it. Just be with it. Perhaps you feel it in your belly. Perhaps you feel it in your chest. Perhaps it's fast, or maybe it's slow. Doesn't matter. No judgment. And I want you to imagine a place that feels calm and beautiful. It might be a place you know, and you're bringing up a memory. Or it might just be an imagined place. And as you bring it up, really look around. What do you see? Is anybody else there? What do you hear? What do you smell? And as you imagine yourself in that calm space, I want you to start to bring awareness to your body. Start with bringing awareness to your feet. To your legs. To your pelvis. To your back. To your abdomen. To your shoulders. To your arms. To your neck. To your head. Start to sense that this calm place is in you. Sense how it feels to be in this calm place. See when maybe you feel it in your body. Taking 3 deep breaths as you invite this calm space to come with you and come with us as we start our session. And when you're ready, we'll open our eyes and come back together. Welcome back. And just pause for a moment and reflect, maybe that felt beautiful. And there was something that you liked about it. Maybe it felt difficult. Just make a note of it without judgment. Now, today, what I'm sharing with you are my top 7 lessons that I learned from my dark night of the soul journey. And what I'm going to be starting with here is all about what is burnout. Because I don't know about you, but I often mishear burnout being misused so often. I'll hear things like people say, by the end of the day, I'll go to work energized, and by the end of the day, I'm burnt out. Or like, I was fine last month, but now I'm burnt out, but I think I need a few nights sleep and then I'm going to be fine. And actually, people often use burnt out as a way of saying I'm tired or maybe exhausted, right? But what I wanted to really start with is saying that what is burnout? And burnout is actually a syndrome that is defined as chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed. And that is got a triad of physical or emotional exhaustion, a sense of reduced efficiency, and negativity. And so some of you here may be familiar with this and maybe indeed feeling some of these or one of these at least. And what it felt like to me was I was getting more and more frustrated with myself, feeling more and more useless, more and more worthless, more and more like my work was not enough, like I was not enough. I was pushing myself harder and harder, but meanwhile getting more and more exhausted, getting less and less productive. And the more that I was getting exhausted and less productive, the more that I was pushing myself, but the worse that I was actually feeling. That is burnout. And actually, what I realize is that burnout, for very many of us, is intimately related with the dark night of the soul. And that, for me, was where my burnout went. This idea and this feeling of just being consumed by darkness. I felt like my life had really lost meaning. I'd lost my purpose for the first time in my life. I had this profound sense that I was broken, that I was lost, that there was moments of absolute despair. There were moments when really just getting out of bed in the morning felt like a major achievement. And so my first pause here for you here is to really spend a moment to reflect for you. How are you feeling when it comes to managing your work and your work stress? Did any of those 3 symptoms ring true for you? I'm going to invite you, as you reflect and as you connect to those 3 symptoms, to maybe answer this poll. You press 1 if you're feeling that physical and emotional exhaustion. 2, if you're feeling that reduced efficiency. 3, if you're feeling that negativity. 4, if you are experiencing all of the above, i.e. you think you have burnout. And of course, 5, if you don't have any of those symptoms. Thank you for everyone who has answered that. I'll give you a couple more moments to press the buttons if you're still sitting on the fence. There's no right and wrong. There's no judgment. There's just you bringing awareness to where you're at. And perhaps we can share the results. Are we able to do that? The results are in, and 28% of you have answered that you have all of the above, i.e. you have that triad of burnout. And an equal number have none of those symptoms, which is brilliant to hear and see. And then there's 20% of you who are struggling with the physical and emotional exhaustion, a similar number from a sense of reduced efficiency, and 9% from negativity. So we're going to just close that. So what I then realized as I was sitting in my valley of darkness, I was feeling so broken. I was feeling so lost. I was feeling so confused. And I was like, I'm a doctor. I must know how to deal with this. And so I started to kind of look in my, proverbial medical toolkit and realized that actually, ridiculously, even though I was in a very profession that should know about burnout and should know the symptoms and the signs and how to see it and how to recognize it and how to manage it, I didn't. And I honestly had no idea what to do about my state. And so I started to study, I started to learn. And I was particularly interested in learning about trauma, even though at the time I was absolutely convinced I was not traumatized. In fact, I used to say to people, it's amazing, how much I've been through and how untraumatized I am considering that. And then as I started to understand and learn about trauma, I realized that actually it had taken up home in every cell of my body. And that trauma was a huge fuel that was beneath my burnout, as it is for so many of us, frontline workers, health workers, social change warriors. And so what is trauma? Well, Dr. Gabor Mate defines it as, says that trauma is not what happens to you. It is what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. It is the scarring that makes you less flexible, more rigid, less feeling, and more defended. I'd love to share with you a video from Dr. Amy, who was one of the 10 experts who I reached out to, and who, together with Thomas and other experts, are contributors to a trauma healing course that I'll be telling you more about later. And so Amy is a trauma therapist and a family therapist, and she specializes in EMDR. And she's speaking here together with me about what is trauma.
We're describing the impact on the brain and body and nervous system. We're not talking about events. And that can be both liberating and also confusing. Because we used to believe that if you went through something really hard, like what's called a single incident trauma, which is like a single sexual assault, and then you had a really hard time after that, you could make the connection between the sexual assault and what was hard, what continued to be difficult. What we understand now is that people can go through all sorts of experiences, and their systems, their bodies and their nervous systems and their brains react to it as a trauma, even if the rest of the world does not.
Weird.
And so the way I like to think about trauma is the analogy that I use with folks I work with is that I think about it in terms of like metabolizing or digesting. So when we eat food, we digest it and our body knows to metabolize it. And what that means is that we take the good stuff and get rid of the bad stuff. And it's a process. It just happens, right? And in general, that's how experiences work for us, is that we digest or metabolize the experiences that we have on a daily basis, right? What trauma does is it's as though you ate a ton of pizza and then your body stopped. You would feel really uncomfortable because that process had not been completed. Trauma is when there is a state of overwhelm and the body can't metabolize the experience fast enough. So things get stuck in the nervous system. And that impacts then how we react moving forward. And when something is stuck in your body, which is what we understand now, it's not the story, it's not the actual events, but it is how it has been brought into your body and your brain and what has happened then. So what is traumatic for one person is might not be traumatic for another person. Right?
That's so interesting. Yes, absolutely.
And, I think that's important because a lot of people feel like when they start to struggle with what are ultimately survival instincts, your body responds, and this is the way I talk with folks about it. The thing about trauma is that your body takes in information in the present. It bumps up against one of those places that hasn't been metabolized, and that triggers a survival response. So those survival responses are pretty basic. It's a fight, flight, freeze, collapse. That's it. And most of our behaviors that are so uncomfortable and that get in the way of us feeling like we're leading productive, connected, engaged lives is that our trauma responses. So we might pick a fight with our spouse or our partner. We might be really disconnected around our kids. We might not be able to complete a work assignment. We might feel really numb in our bodies and not really able to really enjoy any physical pleasure, whether it's sex or a nice shower. Like you just feel like you're sort of mechanically going through your day. Those are all survival responses that the nervous system implements as a way of getting through an overwhelming experience. And so what trauma is when the body and the nervous system and the brain respond to the present as if it is the past.
Great. And what really struck me when I was learning about trauma and as I was sort of going through the process myself was about the whole being effect of trauma. Because I don't know about you, but for me, even as a medical doctor with my training, for me, trauma was equal to PTSD and it was a mental health issue. Whereas what I came to understand and realize was it was affect us at all levels, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, right? And so I'm going to read this out, but I want you to make a note of perhaps some things that you may be struggling with, like PTSD or anxiety disorders or panic disorders, or maybe you're just feeling jumpy. Any eating disorders, addictions, risky behaviors, suicide ideations or attempt, depression, chronic rage, explosiveness, reactivity. chronically passive, feeling isolated, sleep disturbance, flashbacks, any intrusive thoughts, imageries, or emotions. Or maybe you are feeling avoidant of situations or of people. Maybe you have survivor guilt. Or maybe you have some self-doubt and shame. And those two ones were such important landmarks and signs and symptoms of trauma that I didn't actually appreciate and realize until I started to learn about it. But importantly, it affects our physical body. And we now know that trauma, especially childhood trauma, leads, if unprocessed, leads to a lot of chronic health issues, such as that affect the whole body. So it can have GI, gastrointestinal symptoms like irritable bowel disease, right? Irritable bowel syndrome, headaches. It can cause cardiac problems, musculoskeletal problems, respiratory problems, dermatological problems, autoimmune problems, right? So I hope that you're getting the sense here that actually your trauma may not be manifesting as a straight up post-traumatic stress disorder, as a textbook description of it, but it may be manifesting in a somatic way or in another way. Now, it'd be interesting actually to see in the chat who here counts themselves as, you know, a frontline worker of some sort. You're a health worker, you're a humanitarian worker, you're an emergency responder, you're a you're maybe, who I'd just be interested to see in the chat here. Who here knows that they are living through a lot of vicarious trauma from their profession? Because for so many of us, there is this professional trauma that comes with our witnessing, with everything that we go through. And unfortunately, even though we are in the 21st century, most of our professions are really poor at supporting us through it, because they kind of see it as, this is normal, this is part of my work, right? I'm a doctor. But actually, we normalize a lot of the abnormal things. And it isn't normal to see so many people dead and dying, whether that's because you are part of the COVID response, or whether because you work in a war zone, or because of whatever context that you may be working in here. The earthquake is obviously one of the ones that brought us to this event. So we normalize a lot of the abnormal, but I was never offered any help for after, the 10-year-old who I tried to resuscitate and I couldn't bring back, or the 20-year-old who died at the end of my syringe, or the 25-year-old who committed suicide and I couldn't resuscitate. There's been so many countless events, each one of them potentially leading to trauma. And that's not counting any of our personal history, any childhood traumas that we may have carried into our adulthood and into our professional life. What's particularly interesting, I think, is that for so many of us who work in this, as a frontliner, as an emergency responder, health worker, humanitarian worker, etc., is the moral injury. Okay, so what I mean by that is an event that is perceived by a person that is experiencing it as violating an important moral value in a high-stakes context. Okay, so the violation might be something that you have done or failed to do, like failing to save somebody's life, something that someone else failed to do for you or to you, or something that you have witnessed. Now, you could argue that we live in a world that is morally injurious, and that whether you are Palestinian or not, we are all there being injured morally by what is happening there, same whether it's happening in the Ukraine, etc. So again, just curious to see in the chat, who here thinks that part of their work has created a moral injury for them. That perhaps they've had to make some extremely difficult decisions. Like at the time when I knew that when I was in Syria and I was treating mass casualty events, I knew that even though I was doing my best, I was not providing the best medical treatment for them, because I simply didn't have access to the tools and the equipment and the resources that I needed. And I knew that instead of, for example, intubating and ventilating a child and sending them in a well-resourced ambulance, I was sending them half choking in the back of their parents' cars without any oxygen, because that was the best that I could do. But it was devastating. And I see some of you in the chat are saying, yes, you've been through that. And so my love to all of you here. And you know what? Here's the thing, that when this is our profession, we normalize it, right? We have to carry on. So we box it off and we carry on. Sometimes we're moving on to the same disaster in the same day, let alone the next day and the next day and the next day. So just taking a moment to reflect here. What comes up for you as I've been talking about that? Could be an emotion, a feeling, a sensation, a memory, an image. Just spending a moment with it in your calm space. Being that compassionate witness to yourself. Connecting to your inner wisdom. Holding you in your experience in this moment. Now, the next lesson that I understood as I realized it was burnout, and then I realized there was trauma underneath the burnout, I realized that the trauma is actually imprinted in our nervous system. It lives in our physiology and in our biology. It is not some mental construct. Again, as so many of us are led to believe, and us being either lay people or even me as a medically trained doctor was never trained and taught about all of this. So what do I mean by this? Now, who here knows about survival mode and having a stress response or a survival response? Can I get a show of hands or a yes in the chat? Who here knows what I'm talking about? Right? Many of us. And honestly, I had no idea that I was so disconnected from myself and disconnected from my body, and that I was so stuck in survival mode until the wheels started to fall off and I started to realize a few things. Like, I remember one day sitting there, this was just before the Valley of Darkness. I was still smoking at that point and thinking, isn't it curious how I'm smoking a lot at the moment, but I don't feel stressed. But I can see that my smoking goes up and down, which kind of tells me that perhaps my stress is going up and down, but I was so completely detached from my stress response by then. I had no idea that I was stuck in my stress response and stuck in survival mode. And really, I remember the moment when 6 months into my healing journey, 6 months into daily Qigong, right? The beautiful, slow Chinese martial art, which felt ridiculously frustrating for me when I first started it. I remember the moment when suddenly I was like, I'm not stressed anymore. It was like I came out of like a cartoon, like, it was like, I could feel a physical difference in my state of being. So I want to share with you here a video conversation that I had with the magnificent Deb Dana, who is an expert on this all things nervous system regulation. Some of you here will know about Deb Dana's important work with Steve Porges and about translating the polyvagal theory into clinical practice and into tangible practices that we can all use and understand. So here's Deb Dana talking about the nervous system states.
Thanks to Steve Porges's brilliant development of polyvagal theory, how we understand our body, our nervous system comes from his work. And yes, trauma is not so much the actual events, the details of the events, it's how our nervous system responds to those events. Because as we know in our experience, two people can have the same experience, and yet we have very different outcomes around that. And that's because our nervous system has different ways of responding. And what it does, it has three basic ways of helping us navigate the world. The first, the place we long to be, and I think inherently our nervous system knows how to take us to, given the right opening, the right pathway, is that system of safety and connection. The place where we feel regulated enough, organized enough to move through the world with our body and brain working together to problem solve, to find ways to navigate difficult experiences, and find a way to do it with a bit of ease, flexibility, resilience. Resilience comes out of this place. And then we have two survival places that exist in our nervous system. Then our nervous system takes us to these places when it has a sense that we are in danger. The first being fight and flight. And all of us probably, have that experience of being flooded with, cortisol and adrenaline, that we feel overwhelmed with flood of energy, right? And it's disorganized, it's chaotic. Our brain no longer works in a way that helps us. We are hypervigilant. We can't sit still. We can't focus. This is a outcome of your nervous system taking you to survival of fight and flight. And it we like to say we notice it, we name it, and we normalize it, because it happens to all of us in small ways, many times a day, and in big ways when we're in really circumstances that are unsafe, that really are bringing us the danger. The other survival state is sort of the opposite of fight and flight. It's where we feel drained of energy. We collapse. We shut down. It gets more and more intense, as we enter into that state, and we can feel hopeless. We feel despairing. We feel, why bother, give up. We no longer reach out. We're lost in our own world. So that's the other survival state, right? And what we want to remember is our nervous system doesn't make the assessment of good or bad or motivation or meaning. It simply takes us through these states when I'm going to use another word, neuroceps, danger, because the nervous system doesn't use the thinking brain to make decisions. It uses this other pathway, which Steve called neuroception, which I like to think of as three ways of taking in information. Your nervous system is listening inside your body all the time. So when we don't feel well, when we are sick or have a headache or a stomach ache or are injured in some way, the nervous system feels in danger. It gets a cue of danger. The other pathway is the environmental pathway. And when we think about what's going on in the world right now, the nervous system is looking around our surroundings to see, is it safe or not safe, right? And if we think for a moment about all the cues of unsafety that are in the surroundings in this moment, of course the nervous system is going to feel endangered and take us to a survival state. Right? The other pathway is the between pathway, and that's a pathway that we can use. There's power of connection. And so the nervous system is reaching out to other people through the nervous system to find some safety. Right? And we know that, like you and I have just met, and yet our nervous systems are beginning to get to know each other. Right? And I'm feeling welcomed, and I hope you're feeling welcomed. And that's the power of that pathway to help me feel a bit safer in the world, even if the other pathways are bringing signs of danger. If my environment feels unsafe, looks unsafe, sounds unsafe, if inside I'm feeling unwell, this connecting pathway can begin to help me find the way back to feeling safe enough and regulated enough to continue to work in the world. So that's really, that's the basics of, Steve's brilliant theory. This is what our nervous system is doing, micro moment to micro moment, second to second.
Right. And so just to recap that, I know this might be familiar to some of you, but it's probably going to be new to some. So we have that fight and flight, hyper arousal state of nervous system dysregulation, right? You're feeling irritated, you're maybe feeling even aggressive, you're frustrated, there's anger, you're in action mode, right? We're on it, we're going for it. Or it might be that you're in that, you've experienced that shutdown state. Shutdown state is where it feels like someone has switched the on button to off. And suddenly you feel drained of everything, drained of life force, like you feel numb, you feel flat, you feel like sometimes you can even feel like you're paralyzed. It really is a very, almost a catatonic, lethargic, dissociated, spacey state. Or you can be in the rest and digest or the social connection, right? That is where we have access to our calm, confidence, creativity, social connection. It is where we have access to our critical thinking, to our problem solving, and to our learning and healing ability. And it is in this zone of optimal arousal where we actually can recover, rejuvenate, and regenerate ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean that in a regulated nervous system, you're not going into those. We do. We go up and down regularly, as Deb Dana just said. The dysregulated nervous system, however, will tend to spend very little time in the regulated zone of, the zone of optimal arousal, will get stuck in survival modes and may be very jagged. 1 minute you're really like in that fight and flight going for it. And then, you have that for 2 days and then you're like in total shutdown for the next few days. Then you might feel okay for a bit. So then you go and you push yourself again. And then you find yourself going up and down like that. And so again, a moment of reflection. Maybe you can bring to your memory a recent time when you felt in your fight and flight. When you felt activated. In response mode. Maybe you feel like that now. Maybe you might even be able to extend awareness to what does that feel like for you in your body. I know that I feel a tightness in my chest when I'm in that state. I call it my dragon state because I feel like I'm spitting fire from my mouth. And maybe you can bring to mind a moment in recent history where maybe you felt more of the shutdown state, the hyper arousal state. You know, those duvet moments or duvet days when you don't want to get out of bed? You don't want to see anyone. You don't care. No one else cares. Who gives a flying? And perhaps you can also bring to mind a moment when you felt that connection. You felt connected to your compassion, to your empathy, to your calm, to your confidence, to your creativity. And my invitation for you as you go on from this class is to start to do what Deb talked about, name and normalize, right? And it's starting to pay attention, like when, like, oh, okay, I'm doing this with the energy of fight and flight. Like when we get stuck in it, sometimes we're making a cup of tea with the energy of fight or flight. Anyone know what I'm talking about here? Yeah? Like you're washing around and it's like like there's an emergency cup of tea that needs to be made. But there's no emergency cup of tea that needs to be made. It's just that you're stuck in it. And you can just start to pay attention, like, oh, hang on, wait. Because that bringing that awareness is the beginning of trying to getting ourselves out back into a state of calm. So nervous system regulation, and again, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about this 12-week course that I've put together with these incredible experts. So we're going to be doing a lot more about nervous system regulation there because we can't possibly cover so much of it in this instance. But it's really about attuning to your needs and your state, connecting to yourself, to others, to the divine, if you are that way inclined. Co-regulation is about us reaching out to another presence, another being that can help to bring us into a state of regulation. So that might be a relationship between a child and their parent. That might be you if you're the therapist with your client. That might be you if you're the doctor with somebody else. But it might also be like me. I reach out to my husband when I'm feeling in a state of activation or I'm feeling shut down, and I invite his loving, compassionate presence to help co-regulate me. And it is as we start to do that connection, that attunement, that co-regulation, that we also learn that self-regulation. And honestly, I'm starting to realize that most of us never grew up in knowing what self-regulation is, because we didn't grow up with parents who knew about regulation, who regulated themselves, let alone then taught it onto us. So for many of us, we are coming very late to this game, but better late than never. So I just want to take you through a practice here that I have found really helpful. It's deceptively simple, and it's called orienting. And what, if you remember, Amy was saying is about what happens when we've got these undigested bits of trauma that are lodged in our body, is that what happens is the present comes against the past and it creates the survival response. And so what your physiology or what you start to act on within you is as if you are in that moment, right? You're when that bomb hit or when that sexual assault hit or wherever you are in that past. And orienting is one of the beautiful ways in which we can tell ourselves, give ourselves the experience of being present, that we are here. And so orienting is about orienting to the presence. And so I'm going to invite you all to do the practice with me, okay? And you can use this whether you're in fight and flight, or whether you're in shutdown. And I invite you to do it when you are feeling good, because actually the more that we practice it, the more that we are present, the more that we can then use it when we are in extremis or when the shit is hitting the fan. So here's the practice of orienting. I want to invite you to look up to your room. And I want to invite you to just gently and slowly start turning your neck and scanning your environment. This is a very slow movement. And at that point, I want you to choose something that you are seeing and focus on it. Let your eyes really rest on it. Maybe you can notice something about it that you didn't notice a moment before. And as you're noticing it, I want you to now bring awareness to your breath. Oh yes, remember that thing that we do involuntarily all the time, the miracle of life that is with us, but we pay it so little attention. So have your awareness on that object, but on the fact that you are breathing. And then spread that awareness to your whole body, noticing that you are sitting. Your sitting bones are in touch with your chair, your bed, whatever you're sitting on. I sometimes like to add a little mantra of, I am safe, when I'm feeling particularly distressed or activated, to really tell my system, I am safe now. In this moment, here and now, I am safe. And we're going to do it one more time. After you've done it once, then you start the scan again. Again, just slowly, gently looking. And again, allow your gaze to set on something. And pay it attention. Notice something that you didn't notice about the moment before. And now notice your breath. And now notice your body. Your back leaning against the wall if it is, or back of the seat. Your feet on the ground if they are. You can repeat that as often as you need in order to really get that felt sense that, settled. And you can get that feeling within yourself the more that you start to develop your awareness about how you feel in those different states that we talked about. Now, one of the most important things I learned is about being with powerful emotions. So here's a question for you. Name in the chat some of the emotions that you have been going through lately. Some emotions that you have been going through lately. Rage, powerlessness, anxiety, sadness, shame, numb, grief, fear, helplessness, grief, fear. Resignation, frustration, overwhelmed, anxiety, fatigue, deep sadness, anger, shame, confusion, shame, anger, exhaustion. Yes, I hear you all, I see you all. Such sadness for the world. Yes. And I realized as I went on my journey that I was not able to be with my emotions. I had spent, in fact, a lifetime putting them away. And I had built what I called Fortress Rola. And that was my way of presenting myself as this powerful, capable, strong being, which I also was. But it was really unbeknownst to me that amidst this and deep within this fortress was a mountain of undealt with emotions. moral outrage. Exactly. And so what I'm going to invite you to do, and of course, most of us have our coping strategies. Some are more healthy than others. And these are all very well developed. But what I was sharing with you about the calm space was really about starting to develop a healthier relationship with our emotions. One where we don't need to judge or even intellectualize and understand and explain, but one where we can just give them space and place to be expressed and held in compassionate presence. Now, a lot of people mentioned shame. And so I'm glad that we're going to be touching on that now, because there is a profound difference between guilt and shame. And I'm going to share with you a short segment from this is the last video from Dr. Rutstein, and he talks about the critical difference between guilt and shame.
With the guilt, that then kicks in, because here you are, you there is an emergency, you know the need is huge, they need your services, you're the lifesaver, the humanitarian, the caregiver, and here you are utterly shut down, completely in shock, and now you feel completely consumed by guilt, possibly even survivor guilt. Could you speak to this subject of guilt? Because, you know, on the one hand, it feels preposterous, right? Like that the very people who are doing the most should feel guilty. But that was me for very many years until I did all of the trauma healing that I needed to do.
So first, let's make a distinction between guilt and shame, because I think that that's helpful for folks. So guilt is usually a remorse or bad feeling that we have about a particular action or behavior. I feel bad, Rola, that I didn't say hello to you the other day when we were in the market. You know, that's guilt. And that's about one thing. Shame is global. I'm a horrible person because I didn't say hello to you. I don't deserve to have your friendship, and I probably don't deserve to have any friends, and I should just go off and live in a cave. Shame is this utter, you just suck at everything. You are worthless. You have no value. You offer no collaborative efforts or energy. You're worthless. And one of the things that trauma does universally, to whether this is war trauma, natural trauma, family violence trauma, racial violence trauma, is that it strengthens the brain's shame circuits. And once the shame circuits are strengthened by trauma, they stay on longer. So that's where, in a trauma situation, not only do fewer of the first responders feel guilt, but a lot of them feel shame. I let that person die. I could have been on for another hour. If I had only gone to my mom's house and told her to come to my house, that would have been different. All these scenes play out again and again and again, but it's only over what we didn't do. This is also really important to notice. It's part of this whole cycle. So many people, in addition to the trauma and stress that they're face to face with in the people they're helping, they have this internal eruption of this nagging guilt and insufficiency, inadequacy, not enoughness, because I didn't do enough to help more people, or I didn't do enough to be stronger, or I didn't do enough to whatever, fill in the blank, right? And so you're right, like people who are giving their love, their life, their blood to help other people are at the same time experiencing self-loathing, judgment, and self-criticism because they're not good enough. So I want to...
Who here knows what Dr. Rutstein was talking about and has experienced it? Right? You are doing so much, you are working so hard, and yet all you seem to be is full of not enoughness, unworthiness, self-loathing. And I want to say to all of you here that one of my most important lessons and learnings was realizing that shame was such a red flag of trauma. And so please know that if any of you here have got experience of shame, know that that is an invitation for you to look at some unprocessed trauma that you have. Because honestly, I had no idea that it was that. In fact, I allowed it and let it drive me for so long. Even, those moments when I wanted to go on holiday or even do something as simple as a yoga class, that voice would come up and be like, how dare you? How dare you think about going to a yoga class or to go on holiday? People are dying. Like, you need to get on with your work. Anyone else experience that? That nasty voice that just keeps driving. Please know that is not encouragement. That is not the fuel that should be fueling us forward. That is shame, and it really is an invitation for us to do the healing work. So I really want to invite any powerful emotions that come up. Maybe they're coming up now. Maybe they'll come up after you hang up and you start swearing at me. Thanks, Rola. I was meant to come here and feel good, and all I feel now is rage or whatever it is. Honor that by expressing and releasing it. Because here's what happens if you don't. It comes out as something else. Mine came out as my back pain and my hip pain. Pain will be expressed, and there is no such distinction between mind and body. We make a distinction, but actually it is all the one thing. And if we don't honor our emotional pain, it will come out as physical pain or in some kind of physical dis-ease. And so honor it, give it space, express and release it. And of course, it goes without saying, and we're going to come to it in a second, getting professional help. Now, I'm just going to take a moment. I'm conscious of time, and I'm also conscious that we've been sitting for a little bit. So I just want to invite us to take a few moments of what I love to do, which is just a simple chi break from simple Qigong exercises. And so we're going to play like gorillas, and I'm going to invite you to tap on your chest. And you can move it up and down. And this is really to release and move chi, life force energy. And then we're going to have the palm of your hand, and we're going to start at the neck. I'm going to stop sharing actually so that you can see me in big screen. We're going to start at the neck, and we're going to go down the inside of the arm and go back up the outside of the arm. And again, just moving the energy, just getting everything unstuck. Swapping to the other side. Going down the arm. And up the outside of it. Excellent. Now, here I've heard so much around compassion fatigue, and when I was in my valley of darkness, I was told that I had compassion fatigue. Who here has heard about compassion fatigue? Believe that maybe they do have compassion fatigue. It was interesting because as I started to delve into this, and part of my going on in my valley of darkness and my dark night of the soul, I think for so very many of us, going on a healing journey becomes synonymous with a spiritual awakening. And so as I started to delve into my spiritual practice and realizing that actually in Islam, we call God, the most common name we call God is Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, the compassionate, the merciful. So I started to realize, how come we call an infinite being by something that supposedly fatigues? If you are this most infinite, magnificent, omnipresent, omniscient force, if you are compassion itself, how can it possibly fatigue? So that roused my suspicion. And I started to delve into the subject and realize that actually what most of us call compassion fatigue is actually empathetic distress. And it's fascinating, and don't panic here if you're looking at this thinking, holy moly, I'm never going to understand it. It's really very simple. They have studied with functional MRIs, our brains, And when we are given instructions for compassion, our reward and pleasure centers light up. And when we are given empathy instructions, and especially when there is distressing content, it lights up our pain centers in our brain. So that time when you see that drowned child on the ground, or you see the stuff that's coming out of Ukraine or Palestine or whatever it is, and you go, right? That pain response, it literally is that your brain has got a pain response as if you yourself have gone through a painful stimulus. And actually, it is repeated empathetic distress, which is a negative feeling of stress that leads to poor health and burnout. It is that repeated distress from empathy that actually causes us to withdraw and have non-social behavior. That is what causes us to want to shut down. I can't look at the news anymore. This is too much, right? Literally, your pain centers are like on fire, because actually what's happening is it's a self-related emotion. What do I mean by that? You know, all of these adverts, or all the people when they say, imagine if this was your mother. Imagine if this was your son or your child. What that does is actually make it relatable to ourselves, and actually it engages our empathetic distress. Compassion is a very different state where we keep the emotion, the distress stays with the subject, with the client, with the patient, but we remain in an open-hearted connection to them. And actually, it generates positive feelings of love and care. It actually promotes good health. It actually, instead of wanting us to withdraw and shut down, promotes pro-social behavior. It makes us want to help. And yet, who here has had official compassion training, even though you're a healer, therapist, doctor, emergency worker? I mean, I'm really, really curious. Not from you personally doing it, but as part of your professional training, because I can tell you, and you might like drop down in shock right now, even as a doctor, the so-called compassion and caring profession, I was never given any official compassion training. Just looking at the chat here. Christine has not had some. So Jane Botham, you've had some. Excellent. I'm happy to hear that. But so seldom are we given compassion training. And the great news is that it's absolutely cultivatable. Self-compassion is going to be one of the main modules that we focus on in the 12-week course that we will be starting to run hopefully in the next few weeks. So keep your eyes out for that. What I want to move on to here is the last two lessons. And this one is about the necessity of self-care. Who here thinks that self-care is in some way selfish, a luxury, something that's for other people, but that I don't have the time, money, or energy for? Or perhaps you think it is important, but you're not doing it. Because I want to put it to you that if you're not doing it, then you do not realize it's a necessity, because you would not starve yourself of air, water, or food, because you know that that really is a necessity, right? So who here really has the belief, as I did, that this is a luxury that I don't have the time for, or is really struggling? Yes, essential. Absolutely. It actually took me getting pregnant and realizing that I needed to nourish and nurture myself if I was to nourish and nurture my growing child in my womb. And that was really the beginning of me realizing that, hang on a minute, me nourishing myself and prioritizing myself and giving myself a need was actually not in any way selfish, but the highest expression of my love, care, and compassion. And so my daughter, who's now 4, was really a very big teacher for me. And it was a really huge catalyst for my healing. And I define self-care as that which you need to do in order to stay in an open-hearted connection. Okay, that which you need to do, it might be a thought, action, etc., to stay in an open-hearted connection with yourself, with the world going on. And if you are not in an open-hearted connection, then it is what you need to do to return to an open-hearted connection. We absolutely must put the oxygen mask on if we are to lead on the front lines of change. And if you leave with nothing else from today, then please leave with an increased commitment to your self-care. Now, the one thing I want to talk about here is that it's so critical that we do self-care at a holistic level. You are body, mind, heart, and soul. And so focusing on just one aspect of that isn't going to provide you with the self-care package that you truly need. And I want to bring to your attention the importance between survival care versus healing care. Right? Survival care was when we go and we get that like one massage in the year, like the odd facial when our face is falling off and we want to hide that we haven't slept in 5 years. Right? It's that kind of care which is random, inconsistent, and it's literally just patching ourselves up. We're just putting the plaster on to try and stop the wheels from falling off. It's just in survival mode, helping us to stay in survival mode. Now, there's a time and a place for it because it maintains our resilience in some ways, but I would argue that it is not self-care, it's survival care. Healing care has a very different energy. First and foremost, it's really about the nervous system state that you're in when you are doing that activity. And I'll give you a very simple example. Survival care, on the one hand, would be you make a cup of herbal tea thinking like, that's healthy for me. But you're having it on the side while you're on the computer, you're talking to your daughter, you're trying to finish a job that you're doing, right? You're trying to do 5 different things at the same time while you're having your cup of herbal tea. Versus you give yourself 5 to 10 minutes. You go and you sit down. Maybe you even make a prayer. Maybe you even connect with the plant that you're drinking. You breathe in the aroma. You really mindfully taste it. You notice where in your body it goes, how you feel before it and after it. Can you see the difference between that first cup of tea and the second cup of tea? You've drank the same cup of tea, but one was really about survival care, and one will have a more healing outcome. So I really want to encourage you, when you next do that bit of self-care for yourself, notice what energy it's coming from, what intention and what nervous state you're in. And if you can truly give yourself that time for it to come through for you as you truly need it. Now, the final lesson that we're going to talk about is really here around the final call to heal yourself. You cannot heal the world if you're deeply wounded. So this is a call for all of us to do the healing work because our world needs it. Again, I want to invite you to take a holistic approach to your healing. Do something for your body. Movement is so important. I did daily qigong. Find something that helps you to move your body and do it in a consistent fashion. That goes for nervous system regulation exercises like the orienting that I did. And again, these are all the things that we will be going over in depth in our course. Do something for your mental and emotional wellness. I can't sing the praises of meditation enough. I wonder if some of you here are meditators. Drop in the chat if you are a fellow meditator. And if not, then there are now so many incredible apps out there like Calm and Headspace where you can start to delve into it. And of course, get some support. Get professional support. Get therapy. get a coach, get some official support so that you don't have to go through this together. Because truly healing is about healing in collectiveness, healing in community. We don't have to do it all ourselves. I tried, it didn't work. And now I'm doing it together with others, whether it's here or in other communities that we've got. And so I want to invite you and encourage you to reach out. If you are one of those 25% who are burnt out, who today might you reach out to get some support? Maybe it's professional support. Maybe it's just a co-regulating presence that you can reach out to. Who can you share with today that you're struggling? As I wrap up, I want to invite all of you to take the I Thrive score test that I did. It's an assessment to help you just see where you are in your life, where you are in your state of surviving or thriving. It helps you to really get a sense of whether you're stuck in survival mode or whether you are living that full thriving life. We will be sending that all to you now. But I just feel so honored that I now get to work with people on a one-to-one level or with organizations, really focusing on burnout prevention, burnout recovery, trauma healing, and my favorite, which is the post-traumatic growth. Because that's what I want to end on now, is that you are your own hero. You have got your own lessons. Burnt out or not, traumatized or not, you are resilient beyond measure. You have so much internal wisdom. And out of my valley of darkness, I now feel the most powerful, the most grounded, the most present. I can assure you that if you continue to go through your valley of darkness, through your dark night of the soul, at some point there will be an emerging. At some point you will get that growing sense of inner peace and serenity. You will start to rekindle your connection. That sense of purpose and meaning in your life will return. The clarity will come back. You will feel the more aligned and authentic version of yourself. You will have a greater capacity to deal with your emotions and with life in general. Joy, remember joy? Joy will come back. Happiness and contentment will come back. Resilience, that ability for you to bounce back, will come back. And you will come out of it transformed. It will be an evolution. And it's been my experience and the experience of many of my clients, as well as in the literature, that trauma healing goes hand in hand with our spiritual awakening. And so you may receive some deep mystical insights. You may find yourself immersed in more of your spiritual practices. But one thing's for sure, you will develop a greater sense of gratitude and live a much more aligned and authentic life, full of self-love and self-acceptance. And so I want to invite all of you to start or continue that journey. And if I can help you on this journey, I will be so, so honored. The 12-week course is going to be coming super soon, so watch out. We will be sending you all details about it. We'll be going through the wounded healer, about the nervous system, about trauma, about resilience and resourcing. We will talk about some of the more difficult emotions like grief, shame, and guilt. And then we will do a deep dive into self-care and into healing as a collective and how we refine hope, faith, and trust. So I look forward to sharing that with you. Look forward to seeing many of your faces there. And I'm just going to say thank you and invite any questions before we move on to our global social call. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, beautiful, Rola. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I'm just going to plug my laptop in.
Yes, good idea.
Important.
Maybe we can also stop the slide share. Wonderful. And we can take a moment to come back to our community. Yeah, thank you so much for this incredibly rich call. And I think we can all feel that it comes from this place of really knowing that place, being on the front lines yourself. And also understanding as part of our community that we're all in some ways at the moment on the front lines. The world is in crisis, and I saw that in some ways people were thinking, am I even enough on the front lines to be part of this? Do I count? Does my suffering count? I'm just acknowledging that we're all on the front lines in some ways. And I think this work is so timely and so aligned with the work in the Pocket Project that it's just perfect to grow and build this partnership. So I want to thank you.
Yeah.
And as you said, healing happens in community. So I want to invite you all to stay on and deepen into our community space as we actually practice healing together here today. But before we go there, I would love to bring you a question that came up in the chat. And I think we'll probably just go with one question now. And then as we move into the second part of the call, there'll be space for more. But Dominique wrote, in my need to spend more alone time and cut back from work hours, I feel that my work has suffered, and I am now only helping a very small number of people. My hope is to heal and help more, but I'm also wondering how much the drive is coming from an unhealthy place. So, I think this is a beautiful question about how do we find that balance between being out there and taking time for self-care. It's just another way of bringing that question to you.
Yeah. And thank you so much for raising it, because that is absolutely the conundrum and dilemma that so many of us have. In my case, that choice was eventually taken out of my hand, right? So I was resilient and strong and basically fought every attempt that I or others had to do self-care until I basically fell apart and had to. And so I hope that none of you here get to that state where that choice will be taken out of you. I remember the words of my mentor when I told him I was burnt out. And he said to me, Rola, I assure you that the earth will continue to rotate in your absence and that all the bullshit you're dealing with will still be here when you come back. And he did not say that to diminish me or my efforts, but to just remind me that of what I now call the relay race, right? We are taught that this is a marathon, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint. You'll have to keep going. Who else has heard that? Who else was taught that? Like, keep going. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? But what I came to realize is that it's not. It's actually a relay. I'm meant to run when I have the baton, and I run hard and I run fast, and then I pass it on. And then I rest and I recharge and I play while you run hard and you run fast and you do your best and then you pass it on. So we are all meant to be in that. And I think we need to move away from the feeling like we have to deserve and earn our rest to one where there's a paradigm shift of it being normal. I'm a relay racer and it's not time for me to run. It's now time for me to sleep. Or in the case of, did you say Dominique? I'm not sure. It was that what was their name?
That's correct.
Yeah. Then there's the time when it's time for me to do the healing work, because you know what? It's going to help me to come back as a much greater healing presence. And that's how it felt for me. I felt like going out of my valley of darkness, I actually transitioned and evolved from a savior to a healing presence. And it's a very big difference. There isn't this great sense of over responsibility, that it's all lying on me and only me. And it became, I'm here to do what I can. And that's all I can do.
Beautiful. So I think with that, we've also, it was beautiful. It was intense. We took in a lot. Our bodies need a break. So let's give our bodies a break. Let's give our bodies some movement. And we're going to put on some beautiful music for you now. Maybe we can take the highlights off from Rola and me and come back to the gallery view, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, huge thank you to you, Rola. And we're not complete, so Rola will stay with us. We're going to continue here. But before we continue, let's just take a 5-minute bio break. Move to the bathroom, move with the music here on the screen. And also when we come back, we'll cohere, we'll move, and there'll be space to share more deeply with each other. Thank you, Rola. Thank you, everyone. We would love to start. I'm just removing the spotlight. I would love us to stay on the gallery view for a moment before we continue and just take a moment here together. So if you can, let's turn on our videos. If you can, take some space around you. If you can, stand up. We've been sitting for a long time. So if you can, stand up. Yeah. And let's just take a moment. As Rola said, we're healing community. So let's take some deep breaths together to arrive back. And I invite you to just take a moment to feel your feet on the ground and to bring your arms to your side to calm your hands. And just with your next in-breath, slowly let your arms rise. Then with your out-breath, bring them down slowly. And with your in-breath, slowly let your arms rise. And with your out-breath, just let them come in. Maybe you can take a moment to look at the others on the screen and let's see whether we can synchronize our movements. Synchronize our breaths. And if you sit, maybe you can find a way to participate. One more time. Let's see whether you can make this breath the biggest breath. And then stretch. Yeah, and let's slowly come back together. To our places. Yeah, and today is truly an experiment also for us. How does it work to bring an incredible class like what what Rola just shared with us. How is it to bring such beautiful class into this space and then create a space for global social witnessing after that? You know, and we might learn from today, as some people already said, that it's a lot to bring both into one space. So let's see how it is truly for us today. You know, how it works. Because we've gone to deep places today with Rola. She's taken us to questions, places around not just the anniversary of a very painful event that led to the death of over 55,000 people. Yeah, but also invited us to connect to the places in our souls where we might experience moments of burnout, exhaustion, moral injury, shame around insufficiency. And we could see the amount of resonance in the chat. Yeah, so I'll say a few words about global social witnessing, and then I'll take us into a short reconnection to ourselves before opening the space here for sharings. Yeah, and part of this work, as Rola said, is the deep understanding that it needs us as a community to really change not just the systems, but also our healing journeys, where we start moving beyond self-care on a personal level, and we grow, in addition to that, collective care, group care, cultures of trauma-informed care together. And, you know, this is part of what people have also been asking for in the chat, and what Rola, what you're working on and what we're working on. Yeah, so part of the practice, one part of the practice is how can we presence what is happening in the world together? When what is happening in the world today, what is happening in the world is too intense to process in our own nervous systems. How can we start processing together? And this is what we would like to practice here now. Can we actually support each other as we move to front lines, move back? You know, can we be a true support to each other? That this doesn't become something that each of us needs to find our own way in, but that it's really something where we are there for one another. And this is something that in the Pocket Project community we're actively growing. And in my last conversation with Thomas, it was interesting. He was saying with Thomas Hubel, who's very much, he's the founder of the Pocket Project and has done very rich work on collective trauma, ancestral trauma, individual trauma, and especially on healing. And he said that as he practices system sensing in regards to the Pocket Project and our community, that he can literally feel how the capacity in this community to host discomfort, to stay with instead of turn away, how this capacity has grown through these kind of resourcing calls, through this practice, recurrent practice of coming together. Yeah, so that is deeply encouraging. And we also know that as we do witnessing practices for what is happening in the world, for what is happening in us, that one very important aspect of that is to keep moving towards perception towards what might maybe also be painful to witness, but then also take a step back and notice, where am I right now? Where is my body? Where are my emotions? Is that triggering of hypoarousal or hyperarousal showing up in me? If it is, where is it taking place? What is my toolkit? Whether it's the orienting, the connecting to a space of inner calm that supports me to stay with, to be with, and then come back to witness. So what is that movement, the dance that I can have while I practice this differentiation between compassion and empathy, which I think is very interesting. Yeah. So we would like to take some time now for a practice where we allow our community to act as a space of support for each other, and where you are invited to bring your experience of being on edge, but also maybe your experiences of finding solace, of finding your pathway with it into this community. And we take time to be there for one another and offer space. And the place where we will start is with ourselves. So I invite you to, again, relax your eyes, relax your way of seeing, or close your eyes. And just notice again how you are here right now in your body. And we might start with just touching ourselves in our body, really concretely. So not quite building on what Rola did with us, and just touching yourself with tenderness, with self-care, maybe your face, your hair. Like a calming, soothing touch. Until you slowly slow down and just enter into the moment. Maybe allow the movement to stop. And move into a place of feeling into your body and noticing how grounded, how much grounding is there in your body right now. How rooted do you feel in your own body and in the earth below your feet? And let's be very precise with that there is nothing to change here, but that this is a moment to acknowledge, we've been already looking at a lot. So, in that process, a part of you may have lifted out of it. Just see, where are you? How much of you is inside the gravitational force of the planet, of your body? How much are you comfortable to land more? Where's the flow of your breath, the support to help you into the flow of this moment, the flow of grounding? Yeah, and you might also notice sensing more into your heart. What are the feelings that were touched upon and that are still alive in you right now. Maybe there's a lot moving. And so you offer space to that. It might be shame moving, guilt, joy, fear, grief, anger, love, compassion. And also, how is your mind? A lot of information was brought to us. Can you allow your mind to settle more fully and deeply, trusting that the wisdom of what was shared can be processed and land? And finally, let's all invite our higher selves into the space as a resource. In whatever way you connect to that bigger self, you might be connecting to supportive ancestors, supportive resources, spaces in nature that carry you. You might connect your soul to space, to the universe. Whatever is most resourcing for you right now to bring in a bigger space of resourcing. And let's just allow that to settle a bit. None of us can do this alone, and that doesn't only include our human community. It includes this bigger community too. And then I invite us to open our eyes and move. Do so in a slow way while staying deeply connected to your soul. And let's take a moment to welcome each other here. Just to look at each other. Hey, we've been here. We've been touched by this amazing material.
So
Let's just give a moment of appreciation and thank you to each other for our presence. Some of us might be watching this material later. Let's take those people into our community. Here, and you might focus on one person, anybody who attracts your attention right now on the screen. Just take a moment to allow your nervous system to really be very aware of yourself, where you are, and at the same time, feel the other person. Just get a taste of their presence right now, the beauty of their presence, the uniqueness. And you might shift to another person, and again, just take a moment. To feel and settle together. Maybe you choose a third person. And then again, come back to your own nervous system and just see whether you can sense the shift that is taking place in our group space. As we really open space to be in our own bodies, be in our own nervous systems, and at the same time feel each other. Beautiful. So, I'm just getting a message that there is some interference in the line, but Sunita, it's actually not my phone. It's turned off from the way. Just so you know. Yes. So here we are in this very special space and community, and we would like to open a space to you to share. Now that we have also cohered our community space, because as we provide space to each other, we want to we want to practice how to really stay present to myself while I listen to each other, to the others. How can I bring care and compassion to myself while I bring care and compassion to the other person? And you're warmly invited. And we would like to start also with people who've maybe been connected to some of the places of the earthquakes a year ago. People who are connected to places that are currently in phases of hot trauma, of war. Frontline health workers, but also any of us who are working on our front line, the front line of the holy crisis of our world. And you're warmly invited to raise your hand in the bottom of the screen. There's the raise hand button. And we just love to hear from a few voices. Thank you, Paula. I recognize you. I know you.
Hi, nice to see you, Kosha, again, and while many others on the screen. I'm very glad to be back here. I'm glad that you changed the days on Wednesdays because Monday was not possible for me. So I'm glad to be back and participate. So thank you. Thank you for the wonderful session, Rola. And I appreciate you, Kosha, the Pocket Project, and the whole community, because I want to share, well, since I've been in touch with the course of trauma-informed leadership, well, I've been committed practicing and, stay present and practicing witnessing as well. But I have a question regarding to what Rola presented today, regarding the difference between compassion and empathy distress when presencing or witnessing any global events. Well, because I don't have clarity for myself. I'm a very empathetic person, and sometimes empathy is misunderstood with compassion. and I would like to hear more about it.
Yeah, and before Rola, before you speak, I also, I just want to say that I think this might be a point where the way that we work with it and in Thomas's work and in the Pocket Project might differ slightly from what you shared with us in terms of the scientific evidence. So I think it would be amazing to hear from you, and then I would love to add to that, because I think there might be quite a few of us here.
Do you want to start then? Because it'd be interesting to hear what you want to say, and then I can follow up.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, so, I think and I think this is an area where I would really love to continue to learn with you, Rola, because I think it is an area that needs a lot of precision and which is so important to us, So how we speak about it is like when you share your pain with me, in my mirror neuron system, if I'm truly with you, on a certain level, I feel your pain. And we actually offer space to that. And if that pain no longer triggers a traumatic response in me, I can help ground that pain, your pain, through my nervous system. So it's not that I don't feel your pain. I literally feel it in my nervous system, and that's also my experience. But I'm able to help ground it. It kind of runs through me, and the compassion is constantly there. And I think what sometimes is called empathy fatigue is actually a triggering of the trauma residue in me, which is exhausting when I try to turn that off. Actually, when I feel your pain in my body and it can ground through my nervous system, that is healing, because my body then helps your body to ground the pain. And that is how we can grieve together or share pain together without becoming sick together. But it does mean that we truly grieve together for the world, and we can cry together now. But when I cry, we can just try it now. Like when I'm crying while I'm grounding, and I literally now feel it in me. And we do that as a community, that we ground, that the whole community now helps me ground while feeling sadness about what is happening. We create a healing vessel together, and you can help me ground my grief. So that is how we would work with that. And I think it's very close to what you said, and it has slightly different nuance, or, over to you, Rola. And thank you so much for bringing this, Paula, because it was actually in me also. Yeah.
I love that. And yeah, thank you, Paula. So I'm going to use a couple of examples because I feel like that might just help to bring it more to life. So my now husband was the first person who, when I first said to him, I'd seen something distressing and I was like, that makes me feel like I want to cry. This is back in the days when I didn't cry. Now I can't stop crying, but when I didn't cry. And he was like, well, just cry. And it was such a like, what? What do you mean? I want to cry and I just cried? Like it just seemed like a ridiculous notion. And he was able to just be with me while I cried. And he was the first person who didn't try to shush me, didn't try to make me laugh, didn't try to problem solve me, didn't try to give me all these ideas and suggestions, didn't want me to eat or drink or do some other thing. He just sat with me while I cried in an open-hearted connection, clearly present with me. And in that compassionate presence, I felt I was sitting with an equal. There was no sense of hierarchy. There was no sense of he's here to save me. There was no activation of my shame or any of my kind of very acutely aware judgment antennae that I personally have. Because I was just sitting with someone who was willing to hold space for me as I was going through my powerful emotions. And what I was saying about the difference between empathy and compassion is that when I look at him, he is sitting there pretty serene. Right? He's not crying actually with me. He's sitting there with me in a very open-hearted connection. I can see he is feeling with me, that he is connected to me and connected to my pain. I feel very much like there is a connection and that there is the space held. But I don't get any sense that I am burdening him with my pain, which is often one of the things that also makes us stop, because you can see someone else's distress and you're like, well, I don't want to distress you. So that often stops us from completing our emotion. So that for me is the difference between when I sit with someone who's exhibiting and displaying compassion versus someone who I can see is being very empathetic, but I can see them becoming potentially increasingly distressed with me as I become increasingly distressed or as I am distressed, right? And I'll just give another example. So I remember that when I came out of my valley of darkness and I was ready to reconnect with the news, because I had to completely disconnect from the news. I had to completely disconnect from everything. And the first day I came back, there was a bombing of a school. 5 children were killed. And my instant response was like I thought of my daughter. Oh my God, like what must these, and I was just so like, there was an immediate repulsion, right? And I was like, turned off the thing. And I was like, there was this immediate, like, I'm clearly not ready. And then I remembered my compassion training. And so I took a deep breath and I conjured up the mothers of these children in my mind. And I was like, I cannot take your pain away, but I'm going to sit here with you as you grieve, as you go through this catastrophic, life-changing event. And I'm just going to sit here with you as you feel this deep pain. And I sat there. And as you said, Kosha, I did cry. But there was this sense that I was witnessing and being with rather than overwhelmed. And I had not taken that pain on myself. I was there in connection with it and in witnessing of it without that contraction. And that for me felt the difference between, whereas before it would be empathetic distress because I would be literally imagining that pain myself versus not. I hope that helps to explain what I mean by it and by that difference.
Yes, thank you so much. It's because normally when we are impacted by this news, it's like to sense within ourselves this slight difference between compassion and empathy distress, because it can be confused. Because it's more clear when you are, for example, in a group, in a community, or in front of somebody else, and then you presence the person, and then you can co-regulate. But with the TV, you cannot co-regulate. You need to self-regulate yourself. And how do you take that in, and how do you process it? So, thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think, that there is a lot of this, like, allowing it to run through us, or, holding a true space where we're not overwhelmed. I feel like we're really saying the same thing there. And, one other question that I would like to bring into this space, maybe rather than an answer, to really sit in this question together, is that, I have such vivid memories of being in Africa where a person dies and within hours, 300 people gather to cry with the family who has experienced the loss. And there's this collective grief ritual where to sit expressionless across, which is in a way, a very Western culture way of showing, of holding space, and to really acknowledge that different cultures have a different way of expressing, I am with you and I'm allowing your emotions to not just be there and I am holding some kind of distant space with you, but I'm allowing this to deeply, deeply touch me. And you are not alone in your pain right now. And that's also at the heart of the global social witnessing, that we're holding a space, we're meeting the places in us where we're carrying trauma, where it's showing us the edge of where we get triggered, and we're allowing it to deeply, deeply touch us so that you're not alone with it. So that whole space, I think, is a space that is absolutely wonderful to keep exploring together more. And I just love that this was brought up. So thank you so much, Paula, and thank you, Rola.
You're welcome. Kosha, I just wanted to add something that what you mentioned, it's to meet the inside experience with the outside. So what you were explaining about this grieving, knowing community,
Right.
that we can connect what we are experiencing outside with what we are feeling inside. Well, that's really beautiful.
Mm.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Paula. And before we continue, we could shift basically to an question and answer mode here. So I just want to invite you, also the next people who've raised your hand, to really feel, would I also want to bring, or at least to start, like Paula, you were incredibly embodied, by the way, that we also would love to cultivate this space here where we hold an embodied space for each other. So Glenn, as we move to you, I would love to invite you to start by really sharing how your body is right now. So, putting you on the spot here. I know that Glenn works at university and does amazing stuff here at Scotland at the University of Edinburgh, I believe. So,
I love the move, Kosha. And it reminds me a few years ago with Capacitor Scotland of being told by one of the wise ladies in that group that I spend a lot of time in my head, which I am feeling in my body. And I'm also aware that one of the questions I wanted to bring into the space is partly conceptual. So I just want to recognize that, because your distinction there of, where we're coming from, I think is really helpful. However, there's, I think there's so much depth in what was just brought up, and the way you sort of, tried to tease that out. And certainly for my own practices, for my Tai Chi practice, I'm very much aware that when I'm working with the breath in a movement sense, I'm moving things through. And so I'm not thinking about it, and maybe not even allowing it to feel. I'm sort of pushing things, through in a sort of very flowing sense. And I just want to relate that, I guess, to something about the somatic aspect, but also something about the intentional aspect. because I think, Rola, when you on one of your slides, you referred to Tanya Singer's work, and my understanding is that one of the main people she imaged for that work was Maturi Kaur, whose practices obviously then suddenly appeared on an MRI scanner. I'm just wondering, Kosha, whether Thomas's own work in that regard would just have a different sort of, would we be seeing different things, and what sort of conversation would they have around, I guess, the interpretation of, what we're doing, but then also what's actually happening in real time within the sort of mind-body nexus. There's something there that we need to be more literate, more integrated with. So I guess I'm not sure if I've sidestepped your question, Kosha. You're welcome to throw it back at me.
You definitely have, Glenn. So, before we go into the second thing, as you say, we need to increase our literacy, right? And you're speaking about your embodiment in Tai Chi and the conceptuality of the question and spending a lot of time in your head. So let's take that serious, because, we spend a lot of time in our head sometimes because it's uncomfortable being in our bodies, right? I'm not saying that's the case for you right now. Our cultures and educational systems really support us to make that simple movement into a complete and utter habit, right? But, I would just love, before we go to the conceptual aspect, to really feel our bodies here together, and for you to notice, just how you're putting your hands, not, but just how is your body right now? How are you feeling sitting on your chair? How is your breath? How is it for you to be here in a big community where we are actually feeling you right now? We're not just seeing Glenn's little head on the screen, we're actually, our nervous systems can actually be with you. And how is it to be in your body? Well, yeah, how does that feel in your nervous system?
The main sensation is a tingle, actually, in the abdomen. So maybe a little contraction, but it feels more like a tingle, and I suspect that has a nervous quality to it. So there's a tingling.
Yeah, so my nervous system is sighing because I notice you're allowing me to feel you more when you say that. Just acknowledging that a part in you is slightly nervous right now, and you're probably speaking to a part in all of us. Because, and we can all just check, can I relate to Glenn's nervousness? Maybe there's a part of me that feels that in my own system, where it might resonate with a part of me that is also a bit nervous. Even at the thought of bringing something and being seen by 115 people here now, And let's just see whether we can be with you, what we just spoke about, compassion, empathy, whatever we call it. Can we be with you in that place? And let's just give that a moment to feel that you don't need to hide it. We're allowed to be with you. We don't need to do anything, we don't need to be anything specific. We're just allowed to be with you in that place. And I notice that to my nervous system, that feels incredibly grounding and simple. And I feel closer to you. Yeah, and I wonder how it feels for you right now, if there's anything else you would like to say.
Probably something around just trying to tune into that resistance, as it were, or if resistance is the right word. There's sort of a need to sort of let go or ease into the sort of being held, which and I think it's great to be, as it were, on the receiving end, because that's yes, I'm having to listen to other parts of myself there.
Yeah, beautiful. And, if you would allow me to say one more thing to that, as you speak about the resistance to being felt and being held in that place, right? Again, you're speaking to a place that many of us know very, very deeply, where we were not held as children. We were not felt as children. And that is how we have learned to go through life. So to trust again that we can be held in these places is super edgy, to say the least. So, yeah, I just, if you want to say more to that, for me, I just want to really thank you for bringing all this, because I feel this is the practice where we're actually practicing everything we've been speaking about. How can we be there for each other?
There was one thing I would add. It's that I can feel a hint of, an ear discomfort, which is something as a child I had as a backdrop to all of the anxious moments. And so I'm getting that coming through, and I can actually feel the younger me relating to, just having no idea how to work with that.
Yeah. And this is like, we're not in a space here of therapeutic work, right? And at the same time, we're able to offer space to each other. And if you're aware that the place where, all these fine movements take place is the edge of what we might call trauma in you, and in us, because what you touch is also the edge of our collective trauma. You're not just speaking for you, you're speaking for all of us. I actually had ear problems as a child. Many of us had to contract slightly because we were not filled. So you are speaking very, very precisely and authentically and vulnerable. And you're giving us all a gift through your vulnerability. We could see Rola move, we might all, that there's a place that is touched. Yeah, and it also shows you where your next steps might be if you want to keep increasing your resilience, your capacity, your inner work, and that we also really offer space to those younger places that were not heard and felt and seen. So that compassionate inquiry, as Gabor Mate calls it, and as Thomas calls it, that is here with us. And then we can go to your conceptual question, but now, it feels like our questions sit in a much deeper embodiment, right? Yeah.
Yes, and I guess maybe if you want to get out clause so that we don't go into the conceptual, the bridge for me is always how to engage people who are working in that academic space, yes. Where, and maybe this is about the paradox that I'm constantly wrestling with, is that so myself and Rola have got medical backgrounds, and I guess just think through the sort of presenting health thing that we're working with, and just coming back into the body is such an unfamiliar move, and yet such a crucial move. And I think, Rola, when you were speaking earlier, you was very articulate how you highlighted that it's not part of clinical training. And that's one of the things I'm most wanting to develop in my own work, is that contribution. And yet I'm there with so the resistance I'm feeling in me, maybe, Kosha, that we were just talking about, I'm feeling in the system that I'm working with. And so I'm aware of these paradoxes, and I'm kind of trying to work out, well, what's me, and where am I tensing up, and what, where do I actually need to sort of, just ease into it, so that it just becomes a relief for people actually to be allowed to explore this, or encouraged, or yes, I'm not sure what the right word for your encouragement there, Kosha, is, but it was lovely how you made something possible.
Yeah, and I think, what I heard you also ask very precisely before is like the brain scan visibility. Would that show something else in somebody else? How else could we show in a scientific way what we're speaking about here? Right? And, I would like to add my question to that, and then maybe we can pass it to Rola, because, I'm very curious, how much can we show and make visible a whole nervous system response? Like now there was like anyway, but just passing it to you, Rola, and whatever you would like to share to that concrete question around visualization, some of what we're speaking here.
Thank you, Glenn. And I love that this is the work that you want to do, and maybe there's a collaboration in that. What came up for me was the reminder of that Rumi quote about yesterday being clever, so I tried to change the world. And today I'm wise, so I'm changing myself. We can't teach compassion until we are embodying compulsion. And so the work comes back again to how are we deepening our experience and embodiment of it. Because I think that's going to help translate it, teach it, pass it on in a way that is infinitely more profound and transformative than showing any kind of fMRI imaging, right? When you are, we all know when we are in compassionate presence or not. So my first thing would be for all of us to deepen that in ourselves, that self-compassion work, to really cultivate it, to make it an experiential thing for you so that you can then make it for others. I think that that's what we all need to do more of, because it's my experience that it's not possible to be fully compassionate with others until we are compassionate with ourselves. And it is so hard to be self-compassionate because it is not how most of us were raised, and so I think that for me is what's really important about the compassion work. What would an MRI show? I mean, only God knows, in the sense that, I'm someone who profoundly believes that we have somehow managed to divorce spirituality from science. And we've made kind of science the God. And whilst I'm a doctor and a scientist, and I profoundly love to see like the evidence and, how things work, I also know that there are some things that, as Kosha said, how can you really sense a whole being's, response to a whole being response? Perhaps it would always be deficient. I'm not very sure. But I know that your nervous system will sense me and I will know what you sense, and you will sense me without the fMRI. So, yeah.
I love this. If I was to add one thing to that, Rola, it's that used the word divorce. And I think it's possible for the two to fall back in love.
I think so too.
And my sense, I mean, I'm a big fan of Saki Santorelli's work, and I have a very strong sense that that he touches people in a particular way, and that, you know, the medical students that he works with come out, yeah, with something very special. So I think you've highlighted the sort of direction of travel that needs to be explored very, very well. There's lots of hands up, so I'm going to shut up and pass back to you, Kosha. But thank you to both of you.
Thank you, Glenn. And if you could just put a resource into the chat also for us that want to follow up on what you've shared about, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you for being here. And thank you so much for your profound, the brightness of your researching mind and the profoundness of the vulnerability that you brought. So that in itself is amazing to have both here. So thank you for both of that. Yeah, so thank you for your presence. And I'm so sorry that we are at the end. This has been such a long call, and we are at the end. And I would just love to hand over to you, Rola, for any last sentence from your side.
I can sense in myself a change from how I came into the session from how I am now.
Sure.
And that was even with all the grounding and nervous system regulation and connection work, I was still coming in to present. And having this opportunity now to be with you, I can sense that we're all just here, right? On the same level, being together, connected together. And how beautiful to slow down in the way that we did. In a world that's manic. In a world that is just go, go, go. Like it's a fight and flight world that we often live in, right? It's that energy. And yet we have chosen to take time to co-regulate and self-regulate and connect and to be together with each other. And I would say that trauma is our disconnection. It is our isolation. It is our illusion of separateness. And I lived in that illusion for so long, unknowingly. Even when I was collaborating and partnering, I didn't truly feel the interconnectedness. It took going on my healing journey to truly connect to myself, all the pain, all the struggle, all the trauma. But in that feeling and in that reconnection to myself, I started to reconnect to everybody and realize I'm not alone. And I don't have to just rely on myself. It's not all my responsibility. And that interconnectedness has just been the biggest gift. And thank you for all of you here for being that embodiment of that and that living evidence of that. And yes, I hope that if I can serve any of you in any way, that you connect with me, and I look forward to seeing what else we can cook up in this beautiful community. So thank you, everybody. I see you. I hear you. I'm with you. Thank you.
Yeah, and just huge thank you to you, Rola. Thank you for your presence, your friendship, the growing collaboration between us. Thank you. And I also want to take a moment to thank our translators, Bara and Bisam. I want to thank Olena and Olena from Ukraine. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for translating this complex material. And thank you to Elsie and to Sonita in the background who've done a lot to make everything possible. So from our side, we just want to remind you that it's wonderful to have your support as we continue to set up these events. It's not just, doesn't come from nowhere. So if you feel like giving back, please do help us by donating to continue to bring more of these classes to you. And Sunita, it would be wonderful also if you could put the next links in the chat. So we just want to let you know about our next upcoming calls. We have an upcoming call about the art of transparent communication, which is a lot also of what we practice today. Beautiful call coming up with Eva. Then we have a call on transforming obstacles into insights, meeting adversity with curiosity, which is, bringing the same work of being on the front lines in a different format. So, perfect continuation of the call tonight. And we will have a next Global Social Witnessing call at the end of March, which we can already say more about, but we won't. It'll soon be revealed. But then we'll have a next Global Social Witnessing call at the end of April, which will be on technology, trauma and technology. And we'll have 2 global experts on the topic to look at how can we work with technology in our world and explore the connection. So with that, I want to thank you all for being part of this incredible experiment today. I know that far over 600 people have signed up for the call. So I think a lot of people will be watching the recording later. And let us know how it was for you. You will be sent in the post email all the links, all the resources to Rola, to the Pocket Project calls, and also a feedback form for this call. And let us know how it was for you. Would you like more of this kind of maxi calls, or, how different can we shape this? With that, let's come back to our gallery view and just take a moment to say goodbye. Thank you so much, everyone. Be well, be safe.